Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are coming flying out of segregation this morning with our Christmas, I was going to say our Christmas special, but really it's just our Christmas episode of Behind Bars with Officer Goodwin. There he is. You can see him over there. So I am just going to make sure all the social media is all fired up. Everything's working correctly. I'm sure you can hear us. I haven't tested the sound. Once again, I'm just going into it blind, unplanned, unprepared, unscripted, isn't it, Officer Goodwin?
Always.
So yeah, we're coming straight into this. I guess first and foremost, a happy Christmas or a Merry Christmas to everybody. And I hope everyone's dealing okay with the recent news, obviously from the government, that you can't really travel over Christmas, can you?
No.
So
they're advising people to stay where they are and spend it on their own, which I have done for the last many years, of course. But please don't feel sorry for me.
I was going to say there was a claim for sorry there, but I think what's interesting, this wasn't planned at all. Trust me, we do not have any connection with the government in trying to plan these things. Is actually what some people are going to be feeling this year is probably a little bit more similar, I guess, as close as you can get to a Christmas in prison, a Christmas behind bars with prisoners locked up. So let's go turn that into us. Get rid of the world. There we go. So should we start there? We've got a lovely image behind you of bars and holly and decorations. So can you remember back, Officer Goodwin? I'm going to start here. Can you remember all the way back?
I remember everything.
What was your first Christmas behind bars like? Your first Christmas as a prison officer?
Oh, let's go back. You're taking me a long way back now to the 1970s. I was at Hewell Grange. It was an open borstal when I was there. So I'm just trying to remember this because he asked me these questions right off the top, unscripted.
Oh, yeah, they're completely unscripted, literally.
I have this vague memory that we would have done something with decorations, like you see behind you, although in an open borstal, prisoners would have all been out and about all the time. There's no locks on the doors and such like that. So we would have done some kind of celebration for Christmas. It's not the same thing for everybody. Most of my career has been within closed establishments. And the reality is that some prisoners will go along with that and sort of enjoy the day as best they can under the circumstances they're under. And other prisoners are probably not bothered at all, to be honest with you. In my experience, certainly in Shrewsbury, where I spent most of my time, you'll see the decorations hanging up there. It's not unusual for prisoners at times to be decorating their cells. Just to have that sort of a little bit of a, let's do something, we're here now, there's nothing we can do about it, we might as well make the best of it as we can.
And they're allowed to do that, right? Prisoners are allowed to decorate their cells.
Yeah.
And
very often it will be stuff like this, bits of paper they've got hold of, so it's all sort of very inventive. They don't get given anything to do this. We don't give them tinsel and little trees to put up, so they're quite inventive to get to do those.
Can they buy it from commissary? Do they sell Christmas decorations at that time of year?
Not that I'm aware of, unless they've changed. I don't think they send from the canteen system. Yeah.
So they're almost just basically cutting paper chains up.
Yeah, they find bits of paper, different coloured paper, and they do it sometimes.
And they're back to the standard creating of glue of toothpaste and soap.
That's the time that all the coloured printing paper from the education department disappears about a week before.
I love that.
Because we don't give it to them.
Yeah, one
of the other things they're preparing for Christmas, and they usually start about 3 weeks before, is the hooch.
Christmas hooch. Yeah,
I say it's a tradition in prisons. That's not quite the right word, but it's not unusual for prisoners to start brewing up, as it were, and if they can get hold of some fruit and all the usual stuff, they're pretty inventive at making this stuff, and they'll be attempting to make this stuff ready for Christmas and possibly the new year as well. It's a time when prison staff and are much more keen looking around the place. So we might have what they call lockdown searches. We might bring the dogs in to go around the cells to pick up the smells of the alcohol and look around the other areas. They tend not always do it in their cells. Sometimes they try to find somewhere to hide it in one of the workshops or one other places where they think we may not look. While it may seem sort of a bit of fun and a game, the reality is some of this alcohol is deadly stuff, as you can well imagine. This isn't controlled by volume. And it
There's
may
no
have
government regulation on this.
Drinking
this
this stuff
yeah.
may end up putting you in hospital quite quickly, but either way, that's what they do. But
yeah, because it's strong, isn't it? They're using potatoes and, like you say, fruits and stuff like that, and brewing it, and there's no proofing in terms of the
there's no limit to the
percentage.
amount of proofing you do to it. No, so some of this stuff might come out like a bottle of wine, but you're talking about 12 and 14% beer, or alcohol of some sort, or spirits.
I was going to say, because it's more spirit based, isn't it? Now, I absolutely love putting you on the spot, and people really enjoy me putting you on the spot as well, putting you under a little bit of pressure. Now, you'll have obviously confiscated hooch in your career. Have you ever tried hooch?
No, I can't confess to that because government agencies may be watching.
But also,
you'll be taking a big risk because even a sip of that stuff might put you down.
I was going to say, because actually it's the strength of it, isn't it? It's just, you just don't know what's in it.
It smells a lot worse than it probably tastes. But however, when in the prisoner's circumstances, you're just going to go 8 or so, off it goes and down it goes, because it's the alcohol content they're after.
Well,
don't worry about the flavour.
This is something we're absolutely gonna have to do. I've got Harriet, our sales and marketing director, sat the other side of the table again. She's looking at me a little bit like, what questions are you going to ask Officer Goodwin today? But it's I think that's something we should definitely look at, that when we start getting prisoners in to join Officer Goodwin on these sessions, we should absolutely ask prisoners, if they've tried hooch and what it's like, and get that. It would be really interesting. I'd be really curious to know what it's like. I imagine it's like Jamaican rum, the really strong white Jamaican rum that's like 80% proof.
No, it doesn't taste like that.
No, I'm sure it
doesn't taste like that. However, as far as the prison service goes, we're probably trying to prepare for Christmas quite a time before, sometimes up to a month before, because we can tell it is a time of year when things, you need to sort of tread carefully, because emotions can be high around the Christmas time, and we have to manage that. So there will be the PEIs, those who work in the gymnasium, will be organising little sporting events, five-a-side football, volleyball teams, getting the prisoners to get together and have a team. There will be prizes issued out for the winning teams. There's also always, traditionally, there's always a quiz. And that's usually issued out about a week before, perhaps 2 or 3 days before Christmas. And the prisoners can hang on to that quiz for up to a week and then hand it in. Very often they're coming into the office, if they don't know any particular answer, they'll ask us, not that I know any better, but they know that we've got access to the internet. But I always refuse on the grounds it's not fair to the others. And there is prize money involved. I suspect now quizzes must be much more difficult to run, simply because there are far too many prisoners that now have access to illegal mobile phones. So basically they've got these. So really the quiz is pointless. It's a bit like people that go into pub quizzes now. If you don't take these off them, they're just all cheating.
Almost as if it was planned, we have exactly that. This was an image we grabbed, which was taken in a prison by prisoners and then posted online.
And obviously that's posted online without the knowledge of staff. That's not unusual. There's quite a lot of photographs floating around Facebook with the mobile phones.
Absolutely.
And sometimes when you look at that, you go, hey, there's no big harm at the end of the day with that. Mobile phones, that isn't the problem there that you can see on that photograph. Mobile phones are when people have got it and they're doing their drug deals, running their drug empires outside, intimidating witnesses, and sometimes using it to control other people outside, sometimes within their families, sometimes within their groups. That's the danger that you've got with them, but that in itself is neither here nor there.
And we are coming back to that. I mean, someone's going to flag it. I know they will, so I'll preempt it. We are getting to that world of, why don't we just put technology into prisons that blocks phone signals? It exists. It's doable. There's entire countries that block entire media stations and entire social media platforms. So to block a signal inside a jail is doable. Why don't they just do it?
Do you know, I don't really know that answer, but the problem with blocking signals, if it sort of operates in a circle. So if you block something, the signal goes out in a circle. And the trouble is with places like Shrewsbury and many other jails, there are houses just outside in the town. So if you're blocking the signal coming into the prison, you're also blocking the signals outside the prison, so people wouldn't be able to access their phones. However, there may be possibly military grade, what they call one directional ability to block phones in one direction only. I'm not sure of that, but I don't think the prison service have done anything about it that I know of, to be honest with you.
At the risk of getting literally probably shocked when I walk outside later today to go to my car by the local residents. Do you not think that if you buy a house right next door to a prison, and both Shrewsbury is specifically, not so much at Shepton, but I know there's lots of other prisons across the country that are like this. We've got an image of one here, we'll show in a second, where houses are so close to the jails, Horfields like that. If you buy a house next to a prison, should you not be expecting that there's certain things that you have to live with? Shouting out the window, screaming out the window, traffic in different ways, potentials of people escaping or absconding. The same way as if you buy a house on a below a fly zone, you're going to have planes coming over.
Living with something is different to living without it. And you're asking people to live without mobile phones. Many people don't have landlines in their house. Their whole life revolves around mobile phones. So the reality is it's not what you can live with, it's what people are not prepared to live without that may cause you problems, to be honest with you. But no, the thing about Victorian prisons, mostly, they would have never been built inside the town centres. They were nearly always on the edge of towns. It's only the town that's expanded to swallow up the prison, to make it look like, it's like Birmingham Prison. Winson Green, as it was when that was built, there had been virtually no houses around there. A couple of old Victorian houses, probably somewhere around the edge, but it's all literally encompassed within a huge block in the Midlands. But and Manchester and Liverpool and Leeds and all those different prisons as well.
I think that's really, really interesting to hear you say that. Is what people will, living without something is different to living with it.
Yeah. But one of the things about Christmas, in my experience, and it's not literally a guarantee, but certainly in my experience, I found that Christmas Day particularly was very quiet, certainly here at Shrewsbury, and the mood is much quieter than it normally would be. Remember, if Christmas falls at the wrong time, like Friday or Thursday or something, you're in for a very long weekend of not a lot of staff in, and not a lot of the education would have probably stopped on the Monday and won't be coming back until January. There's no civilian staff to deal with paperwork. So basically you've just got officers in the prison running a minimum regime. Christmas Day, there are no visits on Christmas Day. There are right up to before, and obviously there will be after. COVID now at the moment is a different time. I'm talking about general before the COVID. On Christmas Day in Shrewsbury, we'd unlock the doors in the morning. You've got up to about 300 odd prisoners out on the main wing, another 45 prisoners out on the smaller wing. And there'll only be, the last count I did was 17 staff in the whole prison.
On Christmas Day? On Christmas Day.
On Christmas Day. There's no reception running, there's no visits running, so they don't use, it's about getting as many staff off to have Christmas at home. So but the reality is you have to do that at the cost of a minimum amount of staff within your establishment.
Yeah, let's pick up on visits a second, because this is, I know this is a massive thing and I've been following this on Twitter quite closely in terms of, obviously COVID has had a huge effect on this, and I think everyone appreciates that's adding to the struggle of people being able to visit their loved ones in terms of prisoners on and around Christmas. And I think all visits predominantly at the moment have been stopped to prisons. Or
that's right.
They're very,
there are some limited exceptions to that.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and obviously there's lots of friends, family. Traditionally, it's girlfriends and wives, because there's obviously a lot more male prisoners to female prisoners that are very upset, and I get that. So in terms of how it works outside of a COVID world, how does that work in the build-up? Are visits, they're still having visits up to Christmas Eve, or is it the day before? What's
right up, and including Christmas Eve, right up till about 4:30 or 5 o'clock, whatever time that establishment run them. And they will be relatively busy, as you can well imagine. People have got their only chance to come in just before Christmas or just after Christmas.
So as you say, they start again on Boxing Day?
So it will be different. It will be different this year, because prisoners are not going to be, remember, and it's been a long time that they've been in what they call a tightened regime with no visits. So that may not help this Christmas, to be honest with you, because that pressure and that tension's there a little bit, and having those visits before Christmas and just after might have just relieved that tension. I found Christmas Day is very quiet. We unlock the doors in the morning, and prisoners don't they're not all trying to get out. Some will get out, some will stay in bed. It's the only day that they get a cooked breakfast. And Boxing Day, to be honest with you. It's the only day they get a cooked breakfast, where they get sausage and bacon and the usual English style full breakfast. And then at lunchtime, this is the time when they get soup.
Do they have to do work? Because obviously a normal prison day, they get up, they'd have breakfast, they would then do work or education, come back, have lunch, work
Well,
education.
normal days now, in my experience, both here, Featherstone and other jails, they literally give prisoners their breakfast either as a weekly pack, or they give it as a nightly pack to take away. It's cereal now.
But they go off and they do work and education, come for lunch
out.
and count, then do it again. Yeah. Christmas Day, am I right in assuming that's more like a weekend where they don't?
It is,
have
it's weekend
regime.
Yeah. They won't be. That's part of the problem when you've only got 17 staff, because you're letting all your prisoners out.
Yeah.
I know some maybe the gym officers may come in and get some into the gym, and obviously exercise takes place as it normally does. All those things are taking place to keep prisoners moving around and occupied, to be honest with you. To some degree, TVs, whether we like them or dislike them in the prison system, do act as a pacifier. From the days when they were locked up in cells and had nothing but a transistor radio, regardless of your personal feelings whether they should have them or not, they do actually act as a bit of a pacifier, because it kills time. Yeah, it kills time for them, to be honest with you. Yeah. But yeah, so Christmas dinner, it's relatively, it looks traditional, but I think there's some pictures somewhere.
I've got one here and I showed it to you just before, and your response was brilliant.
My God, I have no idea which prison that would ever be served in. Obviously, some are called the Hilton Hotel.
I think that's the new Bodmin Hotel behind.
Yeah, I've never seen that, although they will get all the trimmings, basically. But the meat, that's 3 meals you've got on that plate, mate.
Is it seriously?
And I've never seen turkey on a menu. It might be chicken or some other form of meat served.
So they don't have turkey?
Not that I've seen, but relatively, I'd have thought it'd be relatively cheap to serve up, but there you go.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of prisoners on at the moment. There's some interesting comments. Sorry, gents, I've made the assumption you're prisoners because of what you're saying. So somebody's here referring to who
ex-prisoners, I hope.
Who knows? In fairness, they could be. They could be. Do your bird. They could be prison officers. So I could well be wrong. So apologies if I got that wrong. But they're saying things like hooch is very much like moonshine. It's extremely strong, can be deadly if not made right.
Right.
Darren's saying, I know what it's like. Lol. It's a massive party, and one that you will never forget. Lol. So I assume there's different things, but I would imagine that prisoners are still trying to have a festive feel to being inside, and they'll be going around and saying Merry Christmas to each other and stuff like that. And
I've had many prisoners, when I've unlocked doors in the morning, they come out and they'll say Merry Christmas, boss, or Merry Christmas, and I don't always sort of say Merry Christmas to them. I do say thanks very much, but I won't give you the same back. Why? Because you're not in that place to go have a Merry Christmas, because you're not with your families. Yeah. And sometimes they respect that. They go, yeah, okay.
And in 5 hours
walk around saying Merry Christmas to prisoners doesn't really work for me. Because some might go, well, what's merry about it? I'm stuck in here.
I was going to say, in 5 hours' time, you've got to put them back behind their doors.
Absolutely. So, but we do acknowledge each other at Christmas. So some prisoners don't bother at all. They just get up and carry on as if it never happened. And other prisoners they make the best of a bad job, which is fair enough, of course. And there'll be church services. If church service, obviously there'll be the religious church services, the carol singing and all that. And sometimes many prisoners will go down to that may normally not always go down to a church service. And they go down there and sing the carols, because it's all part of that day, I suppose, of just making the best of it and getting out and about and stuff like that.
Have you ever seen, this is literally coming to me off the top of my head, because I've seen production companies here, and I've seen 300, 350 people on the wing, similar to as it would have been when it was a working prison. I've heard the noise of that recreated. Would you have had prisoners that almost in unison would have sung the same song? So, bashed out a version of Wham or the Pogues or something like that and just sung it all the way across the land?
Not in my experience, but in a prison, I've never heard anybody put music on by Wham.
Okay.
Or YMCA.
I meant more because you see lots of
music and rap music.
Yeah, because you see videos of people, in tube stations and train stations and those times of year, and there might be a busker or somebody starts singing something, and suddenly the entire place starts doing the same thing. And I just wondered whether that was something that happened.
I mean, some prisons will actually put on something like a concert, not on Christmas Day as such, and they get obviously it's for the prisoners to be involved in that. Sometimes staff get involved in these things as well, and it may be, and we've done it here over a number of years, where it's not about them having to get up and always sing and dance and be great entertainers. Some write little stories, some write poems, some just want to have a little tell a couple of jokes and all that. It's about encouraging prisoners to get up there and have a go, and sort of it's no bad thing at the end of the day. But then it builds a bit of confidence. It gives them a chance to express some of their feelings about prisons and their lives and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay,
So it does happen. Yeah.
Let's pick up, because I think we've touched there on food. I'm sure people will ask.
Yeah, it's making me hungry now.
If they've got them.
I'm sat with a single candle and a mince pie on my Christmas day, mate. Get rid of it, thank you.
Cells. So this is literally dressed up as it's one of the cells.
Yeah,
actually,
it's a good representation of many cells. You've got modern prisons that won't look like that. These are typical Victorian cells that you're looking at there, of course. And there would have been a courtesy curtain hanging down where the left-hand side is. It comes down to just above where the seat is, just in case prisoners are trying to. I always get them to put their hand out to me when I'm counting prisoners, because they might have a pair of false legs underneath there.
Yeah, that's true.
And they're on their way to somewhere else.
Yeah, they've tunneled out.
But no, it's pretty typical.
So I think, and again, you can see that they, paper chains that we put in there basically, and that's almost as festive as the cells ghetto.
Some are very good at it and really quite inventive, and others just don't bother at all. Of course, everybody reacts to Christmas in different ways.
And then the rest of the jail itself, I mean, the rest of the wings and the landings, and specifically areas that prisoners would go to, I'm talking about here, as opposed to the behind the scenes bits, the offices and the admin offices and stuff, you would have, again, decorations like the odd tree and
staff offices put their little trees up in there, because there are many civilian staff that work in. You've got the hospital staff. You've also got the staff that work up in the admin. So building up to that time when they're off over Christmas, they'll have their little Christmas trees and their decorations up and leave them there probably to the early January, which is traditional, of course. But yeah.
Is there any danger to this? Like, having the trees. I look at something, there's electrics, there's cables, there's wires, there's decorations.
Well, there's a very big danger there, because where that tree is there in a prison, I was standing with my back to the tree and it was about a foot behind me.
Yeah.
And then somebody called me and I had to get somewhere very quick. So I spun round and I walked straight into the tree, and there was me and the tree both in a bear hug on the floor. So yeah, there are very big dangers.
Did you put it in segregation?
Because you forget these things are there, of course. I had to spin round and get out. But I just remembered that, yeah. But,
I was thinking
there is electric cables, but I've never known it been a particular problem.
Because I was thinking more of prisoners potentially. I had no idea what for, but prisoners are extremely inventive. We know that. Whether there's dangers of them, stealing things off the trees, taking them to be used for various different uses.
If you look at most traditional trees, it's just bits of tinsel and paper, and you've got those little bits of baubles. I don't know whether those would have been in our prison. I can't remember now whether we put them, because they're like little bits of glass, and there's a danger that stuff could be getting ground down and chucked into somebody else's cup of tea.
I guess the argument that's made back is, well, prisoners have chairs in their cells and TVs, so they could just pick up a chair and attack another prisoner with a chair as opposed to a bauble.
They got all the weapons in. Trust me, we hand them kettles to boil water with, and we hand them razor blades.
So what's it? I think we're going to jump into a little bit more serious now, and obviously I'll stop with so much of my humour. Is the sense of it must be really hard, both for prisoners but also for the families that aren't spending Christmas, because it obviously is a very family orientated time of year with loved ones, and for, I guess, for kids as well. I'm thinking of my two children who are 9 and 7, trying to understand that daddy's in prison and not being able to see them. How does that affect? Because you must see both sides. You must see the visitors when they come in.
Yeah.
But you also must see the prisoners.
Yeah. Well, one of the things about prison staff, if you're a serving officer before you have your family, then your children grow into that naturally. It doesn't become something unusual. But as best they can within what they call the detailing system, where we're setting our shift patterns over Christmas, we're going to be looking at cutting the day as short as possible. So different prisons do different things. And when I first joined the service, right away for many years, first 20, 25 years, they would try to work the staff on half days, particularly at Shrewsbury. So you might come in at 7, 7:30, and then work till 2, and the afternoon shift will come in 2 and then work through till 5:30 or 6 o'clock, or even right up till 8 o'clock at night. Prisoners generally are locked up quite early on Christmas Day. They're usually about 5 o'clock. So the reality is and the night staff might come in very early and say, well, I'm going to come in at 6:30 or 6 o'clock now, rather than 9:15, to let the day staff get away as early as possible. And then many prisons that I've been in there, they'll sometimes say, if you work Christmas Day, you get Boxing Day off. So they just swap it round. New Year wasn't really catered for like that. You had to go around the staff and ask them if they'd do your shift for you. I found that as I got older, and my daughter was now a young adult, it wasn't so important. So I used to volunteer very often to do the early shift on Christmas. If I was rostered off, I'd do that for another officer. You've got young kids. Tell you what, have Christmas morning with your kids, and I'll come in and cover that shift for you. So there is some negotiation between staff, and I'm sure it still goes on. But I've been retired for 5 years, and different prisons do operate differently. I'd like to think they're all going to help each other out. I really would, particularly Christmas. Morning's probably more important when you've got younger children, because you're opening presents. As your children get to be teenagers, well, they're mostly locked up in their rooms, or should be, I would have thought, but on Christmas Day.
What's it like for the families of prisoners? And I guess I'm putting you into a position where you're having to answer from, not necessarily from first-hand knowledge, but from seeing it over the years of, how do you think that affects because the prisoners get to make phone calls on Christmas Day to their families?
Yes, they do. Yeah, I mean, I can't make any comments about how prisoners' families behave or react. I know they come in for visits, and to us it looks like it's just a visit. There's nothing particularly special about it for that. But yeah, prisoners, since we brought phones in, have been allowed to make phone calls, obviously on Christmas Day and where they can make a phone call any day they like, of course. But that wasn't true, of course, up until about 1997, 98, when they just brought phones in. Prisoners had no access. It was all communication by letter. So that would have been a longer process. So Christmas Day might have been very much more. At least now with Christmas Day, particularly fathers of young children, they can get on, and they could do quite often you'll unlock the doors and they'll be getting to the phones as soon as they can to make calls to wish their children happy Christmas. That must be, I'd like to think it's a reflective time for prisoners, because they're now standing in a place that in a prison, of course, and their children at home, where they feel that perhaps they should be. So some prisoners may have a reflection on that and go, this ain't the place I should be at Christmas. Others will just treat it for what it is. I've seen prisoners come in sometimes, and they'll come in year after year after year after year after year, and spend many Christmases away from their family. I can't answer to their thought processes over that.
Is there more incidents and more instances of things like self-harm and of, I guess, prisoners having more challenges, mental challenges and such, and strain over that time of the year than there is at other times of the year?
There may be. I don't have any up-to-date figures on self-harming specifically over the Christmas time. And I'm not sure that the department records it that way. They tend to do annual figures with self-harming. But I can see that the pressure, they always say the biggest risk for prisoners self-harming and possibly attempting to take their lives is in the first 7 days that they walk into a prison, regardless of how many times they've been before. So Christmas will have its own pressure for some prisoners. Because there might be problems in the family outside. Christmas is not a good time to be trying to deal with stuff like that. There may be all kinds of pressures on the families that are outside, trying to manage Christmas, buying presents, a lack of finances to do so. All those things might bring their own pressures to the families, and obviously to the prisoners if they've got children. But yeah.
And I'm going to ask Harriet, because she's over there to make a note, because I think it would be really interesting for people that watch and for people that watch the show to connect with families of prisoners to find out what it's like on that other side, because these are things that we have a thought process of. I obviously have my own thoughts of it. Officer Goodwin, you'll obviously have seen it much closer than I have, but again, it's not been in that position. It's the same as when I run a tour. People ask me questions, I can answer the questions, but I've never worked in a prison, so I've never had the reality. But I can tell the stories, but they're not my stories in the sense of I've never had to do that. So I think that would be really interesting to look at into the new year.
Can I just give some credit somewhere as well? Simply because, remember, not all prisoners just get out and walk around. There's going to be the kitchen staff, all the prisoners that work in the kitchen. They're going to work extremely hard over those next 2 to 3 days. And they're likely to be up in the morning, and they're going to be preparing all these things ready for the next day and the day after, which is something perhaps they normally wouldn't do. I mean, they do work 7-day shifts anyway, on a rotational basis, mornings and afternoons. And weekends as well, but Christmas Day they put a lot of effort in. Shrewsbury had an excellent reputation for its food by prison standards anyway. Christmas, you got to give them absolute credit for that.
Did you eat Christmas dinner here?
No, I didn't actually, because I was always saving it till I got home. So if I was working a morning shift, we'd have Christmas dinner late. If I was working an afternoon shift, we'd probably have Christmas dinner early or leave it till I got home at night time.
But you have eaten food. But you have eaten food from the kitchen here before, though.
A bit of Christmas breakfast, full breakfast. Why not? And the kitchen staff.
It's like it's the Premier Inn.
I've got to put the legal stance on this. Of course, prison officers are not just allowed to go into the kitchen and take food or have it given to them. You can purchase food.
I see, you have to pay for it, don't you?
But on Christmas Day, and this is obviously with the blessing of the governor and the staff usually, after all the prisoners have had their meals, there will be, the staff can go down the kitchen in dribs and drabs and just help themselves to some bacon, and egg, or sausage sandwich or something like that in the mornings, yeah. Christmas dinner, like I said, I've never bothered with it, and I'm not sure some staff may do. It would be parcelled up for them, ready to take to the mess. So to eat there, but there's nothing supplied for prison officers.
We've covered officers there. So what about the rest of the prison staff? Admin staff, healthcare staff, works department, the governor?
They're all sent at home. Oh, the big governor.
They're all sat at home. Yeah. There was no hesitation. Did you see that, Harriet? There wasn't a second of hesitation.
Sorry, governor. Some governors are at home. But no, there'll always be a duty governor on. There'll always be, the rank system will always be in place. Yeah. But it's mostly uniforms and a governor grade, if not perhaps a number of governor grades. It's been traditional very often in my experience.
No
many governors, that even if it's not their turn on duty on Christmas Day, will come into their prison anyway. Yeah. Just for a walk around to see how things are going, and wish people Merry Christmas and stuff like that. Yeah, so many governors do come in just as a sign of support for staff, which is great.
So no healthcare. Healthcare is not.
There will be healthcare for obvious reasons. Healthcare, like any place, has to go on 365 days of the year. Okay. There's no exclusions for those. And they have the same amount of work to do on Christmas Day than they have at any time.
So you still have the nurses and doctors doing prescriptions,
still have their medications,
drug rehabs and stuff like that.
Prisoners can still have accidents, they can still hurt themselves. They might be going to the gym and end up, so they'll still need exactly the same.
Oh, so the gym's still open Christmas Day as well.
The PIs usually organise something to get prisoners out. But it's going to be different this year, of course. COVID is going to make a huge difference.
Well, we'll come on to that in a second.
Basically, the amount of numbers you're going to have out at any one time.
Yeah, we'll come on to the COVID aspects in a second, because I assume that's going to be a bit of a best guess for us at the moment. But no works department are going to be in.
There may be someone in, but normally there might be somebody come in, just an overarching person that just keep an eye on what's going on.
You've got a great story. I know it's not a Christmas related story, but I think it's one that I might grab now. I think you were on nights, but there was an instance with a toilet overflowing, wasn't there, or a sink overflowing, and no works department around, and in jumped Officer Goodwin.
Yeah, on nights, it must have been about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was walking down the landing of what they call the ground floor to many people, and I noticed this trickling of water coming down over the landings above me, which was getting into a bit of a torrent, a bit like a waterfall. So I thought, oh no. So I got up the stairs really quickly, looked at the door, and there were 2 prisoners inside the cell. Well, they looked like they were drunk, and eventually we found out they were. And the water literally had pooled up in their cell, because there's a lip, you step down into the cell.
It's about an inch, isn't it?
Yeah, about an inch and a half. So this stuff now is pooled down, and I got other staff, and you can't just open doors at night. We don't have access to keys just to open doors willy-nilly. So I got other staff, and by the time we got the doors open, these prisoners thought this was the funniest thing that had ever happened. And fortunately for us, they weren't in. Remember, when people are drunk, you can either be aggressive or sometimes just a happy drunk. Fortunately, they were happy drunks. And when we said to them, what on earth's going on, they'd got themselves into some hooch. And one of them said, I was trying to get back onto my bunk, and he put his foot on the ceramic bowl that sits there. You've seen them on the pictures before, and he pushed it away from the wall, so it perhaps wasn't secured so well. And pushed it up to get onto the bunk and pushed it off the wall. And there would have been pipes running underneath that, obviously. So he broke the pipes, but they broke the pipes beyond the point where you can put the valve off. So you couldn't turn the valves off. So we ended up getting in the cell, and what I did is I grabbed the pipes and I shoved them down the toilet, because it's an automatic. It won't leak, but it just flushes away.
It just keeps going. Yeah,
it just keeps going because of the U-bend. Yeah. And literally, we had to call in the works department to come and do something properly. Now, we had to move the prisoners from there, because all this stuff on the floor is soaked and wet. They'd been kicking it around. They thought it was a great time. We ended up managed to get one prisoner in another cell with another 2 prisoners that they knew pretty well, and we're pretty happy to have him. And the other one had to go downstairs into a separation cell, because we had absolutely no other space to put the prisoners. But it was what it was. It could have gone completely wrong. All that could have gone wrong. When people are drunk, their behavior sometimes is that, they lose that sense of proportion and responsibility. But fortunately for those 2 prisoners, they weren't a problem at all. But I do remember that. Yeah, it was like Niagara Falls.
Well, it's funny for me, because I've seen cells flood. I mean, I've seen us have similar problems here with it. with it now as a prisoner, with the water tanks and stuff like that. And I know obviously how the plumbing systems work. And like you say, I mean, all the cells in prisons and prison landings, they're built for flooding. They are designed to take flooding. And it literally just cascade over like a waterfall, just keeps going down and down and down and down.
You have to remember those cells, Victorian cells, they're not going to be completely water sealed.
Oh, they're not.
So the cells below it was starting to trickle through on the smallest of crack, and there was water starting to trickle down into the cells below them. But we managed. We do. We don't have any choices but to manage. We called the works department in, and I think he came in. The plumber came in. I think it was by the time he got in, it was a good 2 hours, if not 2.5 hours later, sorted it out. But
that's not bad. That's good. They'll come in on.
They're on call. They have what they call an on-call thing. So because they're not here on a regular basis.
So what happened? Does it work exactly the same, I assume? And I'm just thinking of the outside world and specifically hospitals. If you have a prisoner that has to go to hospital for whatever reason on a Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, that busy period where hospitals are normally rammed, obviously, and slightly different COVID, is it exactly the same process, exactly the same protocol? Nothing really changes?
As far as we're concerned, when it comes obviously to health and safety and such like that, Christmas Day is absolutely no different to us. If somebody is injured on Christmas Day, and then we'll take 2 staff. 2 staff will take that prisoner to hospital, and if it's very busy there, we'll just wait there as everyone else does, even if it happens during the night. We have to take the prisoner away during the night. That takes 2 staff off your complement of 6 staff in a prison like this during the nights. That's to 350, 400 prisoners.
So you just get more staff in like normal?
No. Yeah, but you just take the staff. Like if it's 4 o'clock in the morning, phoning anybody up is a pointless exercise. So you'll just run with 4 staff.
Okay.
And you still have to do all the same things that you did before. You can't just go, well, we won't bother doing that today. So they are high pressure at night time when you have to take people into hospitals.
Do prisoners get prioritised when they get to hospital? Is there a case of, well, we'll see that person first because they're a prisoner and therefore we want to get them done, we want to get them out?
No, absolutely not. They're treated based on the seriousness of their injuries, as it is for anybody when you go to A&E. There are occasions, we use Shrewsbury Hospital and Telford Hospital the most from Shrewsbury. There are occasions when the staff may, if they've got a spare room, put you in a spare room. And they do that not because they think we deserve to have that kind of room. They quite like to get that out of what's called the A&E holding, where people sit and all that. They just prefer that to be out of the way. Now, some prisoners you can take and sit and you'll have not the slightest problem with them. They're injured, they're quite happy to be there, they're not troublemakers, and you can sit there for as long as you need to and be seen by the nurses, the doctors, the consultants. There are other prisoners you can take to hospital that are nothing but trouble. They don't know how to control their language. They're angry or whatever they're angry at, and they can cause a lot of problems.
I was going to ask,
and that's a difficult place to be for staff.
Yeah, I was going to ask this. We've gone down the rabbit hole. Let's continue down this rabbit hole, and just for a second. So, if you're not a prisoner, you go into hospital because you're injured. If you've had too much to drink, you get abusive with the staff, aggressive with the staff. They will warn you. They will tell you they will not treat you if you continue to behave like this. And eventually, security will be called, and eventually, police will be called, and you will be arrested, and you'll be going to the police station.
Yeah.
If you're a prisoner and you follow that same process,
they're yours.
What? You don't get the police coming in and arresting them
unless they commit an offence.
So if they
commit an offence, if they assault somebody, whether it be a member of staff or hospital staff or an officer, if they actually assault somebody, then you can call the police and they can be arrested for committing an offence just like anywhere else.
So do they then go into the custody of the police, or do they stay with you and go back to prison and
they'd
then
like
be charged like that?
They'd like you to stay in our custody, and the police might pop up the next day or the day after and just come into to charge the prisoners.
I was just thinking, I don't know how my mind's gone this way, but what an elaborate escape attempt that would be. You get yourself taken to hospital. You get to hospital.
Don't mention that. Don't mention that. Hospital escorts are one of the most, the highest risk for staff to go out when you're taking prisoners out of the establishment. You're in a public building where most people, particularly during the day, can basically wander into a hospital. You might have security, but they may be somewhere else.
You get
at night times the same. I know it's a little bit more closed down because they only have one entrance into a hospital now, but that doesn't mean to say that you can't. You must remember with mobile phones now, it's much more difficult because they could be going to hospital and they can tell their friends. And who could be making phone calls to tell other people where we're going. So it's really, really difficult. Hospital escorts. There's only one escort that's a lot worse than doing a hospital escort.
Funerals.
And that's a funeral escort. No, I don't know any member of staff that volunteers to do one of those, because you're in a really, really difficult place where the family there are obviously, with their families. There's a huge amount of stress that's obviously going to be on the prisoner and the families when you're in that environment. And we're sat there in uniforms. We don't want to be there. We really, really don't. It's not for us to be there, but we are, and we have to be. Now, they are high pressure.
Let's come back out of our rabbit hole. I love
the way
that look. Yay! I got a look from Harry at the same time. So I got a look there from Officer Goodwin. I got a look.
Pass
from
the
Harry,
sherry over, mate, because you've drunk more.
Yeah,
all by yourself.
Said, crack on, Joe.
Play the game.
Okay, let's talk about Father Christmas. And I've only got half the photo, I'm afraid. But let's talk about Father Christmas at Shrewsbury Prison, jumping the prison walls.
What happened at the top there?
I know.
I'm sure we don't mind. It's fairly common knowledge around in public domain as well. That's a man who's had a name. His name was Poddy Podmore. I'm going back a long time now. I don't even know if Poddy Podmore's still alive, but because this is going back long before I come to this prison. And he was up on top of the roof. That's on top of the gatehouse.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, he's not on top of he didn't get into the prison as such. He managed to get up on top of the gate lodge. It's not the first time he's done that. It's not the first time he's done that. There was a time, there was a story said that he got up there and he was throwing tobacco in for prisoners. The trouble is prisoners don't have access to any part of that prison, so they never had the access to get that tobacco anyway. But yeah, and he was a bit of a character, to say the least, Poddy Podmore, but I don't know him personally. It's before my time.
I was just looking at
probably 670s, I think it is.
Because yeah, there was talk that he'd climbed up onto the roof of the He climbed up onto the wall of the gatehouse, which is there. Apologies, the picture's not better. I will have a conversation with our team about that. But he climbed up onto there with a sack of presents. So it was basically, like you say, throwing things into.
Well, there's no point because prisoners don't have access to that part of the prison. They just don't. And somebody said once that he was pushing stuff down the chimney. At the time, there were two officers that lived either side of the gatehouse in apartments, so that was a bit of a pointless exercise. But I don't know. That's a full picture. Can you get that one?
I'm just going to try and grab it now because I think it's brilliant.
It looks. You've got to give him credit for it. You really.
Oh, absolutely. And Shrewsbury has one of the lower walls, doesn't it, in the prison system? So
not
see if I can get that one.
So we'll all stand really quiet while John fiddles around with it.
I can't.
He's not really fast at this, guy.
Sure, I can't. It's not working for me. I'm sorry, it's not. No, let me try and screenshot.
But he's got the full white beard and the full cap on.
He's literally dressed as Father Christmas.
He looks the part. He looks the part. Yeah.
Let me see if I can grab a little bit less of him. It's such a good image.
Yeah. Well, just while you're pulling that up, one of the things with the Christmas is that, like I said, prisoners can be sort of unoccupied for a long time, particularly education might close down.
There we go. Sorry.
Excellent. There you are. We'll come back to this now. That's a picture of him on the top there. So yeah, you got to give him credit for the cheek and the ability to get up onto the top of the roof, to be honest with you. But
and that looks like a real beard as well. I've got to add. It doesn't even look like a fake beard.
But either way, yeah. And just saying, depends on Christmas falls. If you've got the education closed for 4 or 5 days before and after, remember those prisoners have nothing to do. And the reality in prison is if you have nothing to do or there's no work for you in the daytime, you're going to have to spend it behind your cell door. There just isn't the staff to supervise prisoners out and about. So even they get fed up with a long Christmas break. They do. So you can find 4 or 5 days over the Christmas period. If Christmas falls at the wrong time, Thursdays, Fridays, then you've got Saturdays, Sundays, then you might be off Mondays and Tuesdays as well before the workshops get going. 5 or 6 days. It's a long time just be kicking your heels with nothing much to occupy you. So yeah, usually after about 3 days, even prisoners said, "Oh, wish the bloody workshops were open, boss. I'd get back to work, get something to do, get out the cell. Wish education was back."
Yeah, I can understand.
And sometimes they'll ask, when is the education coming back, or when the workshops open again? As much as they might not like being there, they realise that it's better sometimes to have that at least as an alternative to doing nothing. Yeah, but all prisons are different, folks. Remember, there's I think there's just under 119 prisons in the country. They're all different security. Some are open prisons, some are Cat Cs, Cat Bs, higher security. Then there's the high security prison. They'll all try to do something similar, but they'll all do it in a different way because of the nature of the prison, the staffing levels, all those things. So I can't talk about a generalization because it isn't a routine as such that's designed. Every prison does what they can in their own way.
Okay, right. I think do you know what? We're basically there. We've got a couple of minutes left. We started on time today. We've had no technical issues.
Yeah.
I've even just had a WhatsApp message pop through from one of our from Josie and our marketing team to say, here's a cropped image of the Father Christmas that you can use. So everyone's on it today. We've got to the end of the year. We're on it. Obviously, we haven't really covered COVID as such in terms of how that's going to affect the prisons, but I guess it's. I mean, it's
going to be
locks
restricted.
everything down, isn't it?
Yeah, and the problem we've got is now, because of this second rise going up, you must remember, prisoners are still coming to prison.
Yeah.
They're still going to courts, and they're still coming to prison in their thousands from all over the country. So therefore, there are processes to manage that, of course, as you come into reception and separated wings and separated landings, but it still takes up a huge, and there's always that risk that some prisoner might get through and not be identified and gets to mix with the other prisoners. There are limited numbers, but you can see, but you've also got the staff as well. Remember, once the staff may get it, they may be mixing, associating with each other to agree. They're taking it home to their families. Their families are going out and meeting other families. We all know how this works. Folks. We all know how it works. It only takes one person to give it to two others, and then two give it to two, and it just grows exponentially, and then you've lost control of it. But
which I guess answers the question very quickly. Why don't you just put all the prisoners that have COVID into the same jail? It answers the question very quickly in the sense of, well, it's going to spread regardless, because you're going to have things coming in and out of prison, even deliveries coming in for food and
the logistics would be a nightmare. The logistics would be, you're going to have prisoners that don't want to leave or go far away from their families because of visits. You're going to have all kinds of problems arranging the transportation, because it's all done at a private level now, of course, G4S and GOAME and those kind of outsourcing companies. You've got to get the staffing levels to do it. It'd be an absolute nightmare. And when do you stop doing that? And when do you reverse everything back to bring everybody back to where they need to be?
Yeah.
Remember, some prisoners, like you've got life sentence prisoners, they're in lifers jails. What are you going to do with them? Yeah. You can't just keep shipping half of them out and another half coming in that are not lifers. And it doesn't work like that, I'm afraid.
And you know what, you've picked up a really good point there, because I think we'll do this at some point. Again, I'll give the nod over to Harriet to put this as a subject, is talking about whether we should be putting certain types of prisoners into jails together. So terrorists, it's predominantly, I would say, extreme terrorists, because I know that New Zealand have a way of doing it. It's just, and there was a documentary on it, and they just specified, whether it's right or wrong, this is just how we choose to do it. And I think there's an interesting piece there about whether you house people.
When we get to that, I'll mention probably the biggest report that was ever done in the prison system in the 1960s, called the Mountbatten Report. Yeah. And they looked at that. They looked at the American-style supermax prisons, and they looked at other alternatives. And I'll talk about how that came about and how we categorize prisoners and security levels. Huge change, but 1968 it was, yeah.
And then maybe at some point, I don't know, around towards the end of the pandemic, let's hope it's early springtime. Maybe we'll invite in Robert Buckland.
Yeah.
And then see if we. Do you think he'll join us, Harriet?
Yeah.
Okay, right. That's us done for today. We're back next week, and we are back still live. We'll be talking about New Year. We'll be talking about New Year's Eve. We'll be talking about what prisoners do there. Yeah. We'll be talking about New Year's resolutions, and obviously what that looks like for prisoners, prison officers, families, stuff like that. And we'll probably just pick up a few other bits and pieces to cover in our entire 45-minute show to make sure we get everything there, because I think we'll get through New Year quite quickly. Officer Goodwin.
Time to go, folks. Have a great Christmas. We're going to see you. I don't know if we're seeing you before the new year, but if we don't, then obviously...
Yeah, next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday, so I'll do that then. But have a really great Christmas. Obviously, stay safe, ladies and gentlemen. I want to see everybody back here into the new year, fit and healthy, and getting ready to move out of this awful thing that we're getting through at the moment. So have a good Christmas and stay safe.